as you train the mind, focusing on the breath, allowing the breath to be comfortable, trying to become friends with the breath. It's a very direct way of showing goodwill to yourself and goodwill to the people around you. Goodwill for yourself in the sense that you learn how to develop a source of happiness that comes from within. You don't have to take anything away from anyone else. Your happiness is less dependent on outside conditions. Now, in the beginning, of course, as you're just learning the ropes, it's very important that you do try to have conducive outside conditions. As with any skill, you want as few distractions as possible, a supportive environment, helpful people to inspire you, to encourage you, to give you advice. And so in the beginning it is very much dependent on conditions. But as you get more and more skilled, you find you can carry this sense of being well-centered, having an awareness that fills the body, feels at ease with the body, feels at ease with the breath, into all kinds of situations where in the past you felt threatened, nervous, ill at ease. You now have a center. You're grounded. And you're taking care of the mind's need to feed, something we don't often think about, but it's an important question to ask yourself. Where is your mind feeding? What kinds of things is it looking for to give itself strength, to give itself happiness, to give itself nourishment? And all too often you find you're feeding on the words and actions of other people, things around you. You find yourself feeding on greed, feeding on anger, feeding on delusion. None of these things are good food. But as you feed on the breath, it's not so much the breath you're feeding on good qualities that you're developing in the mind. Conviction, persistence, mindfulness, alertness, concentration, discernment, goodwill, compassion, empathetic joy, equanimity. These are all good qualities to develop. And by quality here, it's best to think of them as habits that you develop in the mind. Because it is more useful to think about the mind in terms of activities rather than what it is. Think about what it does and the habits it has. Because you think of your mind as being a particular way. It's a narrow mind, it's a broad mind, it's a good mind, it's a bad mind. You find yourself stuck with that particular characterization. And it's hard to get out. But if you see it simply as different activities, now an activity is something you can change. Something you did yesterday doesn't mean you have to do it today. And as you give the mind a better and better place to stay, more solid, more reliable, you find that it is more likely to do the skillful thing, because it's not so tempted to just go out and get a quick fix, a quick bite to eat. And so you find that you can trust your mind more and more. This is probably the scariest thing in life, is when you come across different situations where you begin to think you can't trust yourself to do the skillful thing, where you're tempted to do something that's either harmful to yourself, harmful to others. But that's the way the mind is if it's dependent on conditions being a certain way. In other words, it behaves itself when things go well, but not when things don't go well. The Buddha once said he didn't trust the monks who were behaving well only when there was good food, good clothing, good shelter, good medicine. As he said, he couldn't trust them. What happens when the food isn't so good, or the clothing, or the shelter, or the medicine is lacking? So these are some of the ways in which the meditation is a gift to yourself. You learn that you can trust yourself more. You're more at ease in the present moment. You're more at ease, greater sense of confidence, stability, strength. And it's a well-being that has no drawbacks, especially as you develop the mind further and further. You find ultimately that you run across something that's not conditioned at all, not even by inside conditions. That's what the practice is aimed at. Totally free from suffering, totally free from conditions, pure, unadulterated happiness. That's quite a gift. And the thing is, you're not the only one who benefits, because that's the other side of the practice. You're showing goodwill for others. All aspects of the practice share this quality of being good for both sides. Start with generosity, which obviously benefits other people, but you benefit as well. Your mind grows larger, more expansive, able to include other people in your consideration. The same with the precepts. You refrain from harming other people. Well, that means you have less remorse to deal with. If you're going around hurting this person, hurting that person, you sit down, try to make the mind quiet, and it just pops up. And then when it pops up, you can do one of two things: either deny that it happened, or deny that it was wrong, or deny that that person was worth anything, all of which makes your mind more and more narrow, more and more rigid. Or you can just sit there, overcome with remorse, which is like sticking your finger in an open wound. But if you make a practice going through the day, resolving that you're not going to harm other people, regardless, when you feel tempted to say something that's hurtful, say something that's untrue, just hold your tongue. That of all the precepts is probably the most important and the most relevant all the time. But not that many times when we're tempted to kill or steal. Illicit sex, maybe. Alcohol and drugs, maybe. But controlling your mouth, that's really important. And then you find as you do exercise more restraint over your mouth, as John Lee once said, you should bow down to your mouth every day. You went to all the trouble of developing the perfections that allow you to be born as a human being. You have a human mouth. It's not like the mouth of animals, which can say only a few things. You can say all kinds of things. And so you want to use that mouth well. Think of all the effort that went into gaining it. So when you have been observing the precepts, sticking with them, as a promise that you make to yourself, then as you sit down and meditate, there's less remorse. A sense that you're living in the world in a harmless way. And you find it easier to live with yourself. So other people benefit, you benefit as well. Even more with the meditation. We're working to overcome greed, anger, and delusion in the mind. We're learning to make ourselves more self-reliant. That means we have to lean less on other people, and other people are less subject to our greed, anger, and delusion. As we develop mindfulness, concentration, discernment, compassion, these things can't help but spill over into the way we deal with other people. The Buddha once told the story of two acrobats. The master acrobat got up on the end of a bamboo pole. Apparently they would stick these poles up vertically. He got up on top of the pole, and then he had his assistant get up on his shoulders. And he told her, okay, now you look out after me, and I'll look out after you, and we'll do our tricks on the bamboo pole and then come down safely. And she said, no, that won't work. I have to look out after myself, and you look out after yourself, and that way we'll help each other keep our balance on the pole. In other words, by keeping your balance, you're helping the other person. And the Buddha said in that particular case it was the assistant who was right. But there are other cases where looking out after other people, you're looking out after yourself. As you develop kindfulness, as you develop kindness, care in how you treat other people, you're benefiting yourself. As you develop good qualities of mind, you're benefiting other people as well. So this is why this is a special practice for developing happiness that spreads around. A sense of well-being in the mind that allows us to look at our actions in all fairness and see where they're skillful and where they're not. Because when the mind is feeling tired and hungry and weak, it doesn't like to look at its mistakes. And as a result, it's not going to learn from them. You're not going to learn from anything you can't look at. But when you can develop this greater sense of well-being inside, you can reflect with more fairness and greater sensitivity on the areas where your actions either harmed yourself or harmed other people. And this principle of looking at things in terms of actions and results goes very deep in the practice. As I said earlier, when you think about the mind, don't think about it as a thing or an entity. Think of it as just lots and lots of actions. And you begin to see where the ways you think, the way you focus on things, the way you understand things, the way you interpret things, the intentions you have, the way you pay attention to things. These are all actions which can be skillful or might not be skillful. And as your sensitivity develops, you begin to see more and more where you're acting in an unskillful way, thinking, interpreting, intending. And as you're coming from this settled place, you begin to think more and more about how you can do things in a more skillful way. Trying to develop this sense of yourself as someone who is willing to learn. You don't beat yourself up over your mistakes. You say, okay, that was a mistake. What can I learn from it? Realizing that beating yourself up extra hard is not going to compensate for something you did. And it's certainly not going to put you in a better position to do it skillfully the next time, whatever the action was, whatever the mistake was before. And you begin to see a lot of other things in the mind that you thought were things or entities or inherent natures that you couldn't change. And you see them more and more as actions. As we were saying earlier, that just your sense of self is a type of action. You identify with ideas, you identify with a body, you identify with your possessions, your relationships, your role outside in the world. And that identification is a kind of mental activity. And because it's an activity, then the question comes, when is it skillful, when is it not? And you see that the selves that you create, the ones that are more responsible, that are more careful, more willing to learn, those are the ones you want to nurture. The sense of self that is confident that it can do the practice. The Buddha strongly encourages you to foster that sense of self. The sense of self that wants true happiness. He says to honor that sense of self. Don't be a traitor to it. Heedfulness, restraint, these are all activities of wise selfing. Those are things you want to develop. And the sense of self that says, I just want my quick fix, I want my quick bite right now. Those are the selves you have to look askance at. Those are the ones you don't feed. This is where the teaching on not-self comes in. You begin to realize that just because something comes up in the mind doesn't mean you have to identify with it. Because there's a lot of activity in the mind that just simply comes from the force of past karma, your past actions. And that's not your karma right now. Your karma right now is what you do with those things. And you have the choice to go with them or not. So you want to make the most of that choice. Because as you exercise that freedom, you find more and more what freedom means in the mind. This goes deep into the meditation. There's a strong tendency when the mind gets very still, very centered, very spacious, a strong sense of oneness, a strong sense of being at the ground of being, an awareness that doesn't seem to be touched by anything. And it's very easy to mistake that for some sort of metaphysical principle. This is the way things are. Even there, the Buddha has you recognize that it is a kind of activity. As he once said, the highest state of oneness or non-duality is a sense of the non-duality of consciousness, a sense of knowing that permeates everything. And it's a skillful state, but it's not what we're here for, because it's not the end of suffering. You learn to see what were the activities that brought you there. What did you do, knowingly or unknowingly, intentionally or not, that gave rise to that. Because it is an activity that keeps it going. Even just the perception, the label there, that's an activity. To what extent is that activity still stressful? Can you drop whatever's causing that stress? These are the questions the Buddha has you ask, looking at everything as actions. Actions you want to do skillfully, actions you want to do for the sake of putting an end to suffering. In other words, it's motivated by goodwill, motivated by compassion for yourself and for other people. Always realizing that the more skillful you become in training the mind, learning how to act with more precision, more skill, more finesse, the less you suffer, the less the people around you suffer, and the more positive things you have to share. As the Buddha once said, there were only two things he taught, suffering or stress, and the end of suffering or stress. And the end involves understanding the principle of action, what you're doing, where it's skillful, where it's not, what you can learn from where it's skillful and where it's not. So ultimately you can reach that dimension. And the Buddha says you see it with the body or touch it with the body. In other words, it's a full experience. It's not just something in your head. Where your happiness doesn't have to depend on any conditions at all. That's when you can trust yourself. You don't need to feed on anything outside anymore. You've got your nourishment right here. And it doesn't depend on conditions, doesn't depend on space and time. So it causes no harm, no stress to anybody at all. And as with all aspects of the practice, it's a gift to yourself and to others. Once you know that this is possible, you can speak with more confidence about what really works, how the mind can be trained, what's skillful in training the mind, what's not skillful in training the mind. You can trust yourself, and other people can trust you more as well. So this is a good practice to give yourself to. You look at the world, and there's so many things that you ask yourself, if I gave myself to that, what would I be left with? And you find that in the end you wouldn't be left with much. But this is one training, one practice that more than lives up to its promise. So give it a serious try.